renaissance, more specifically amongst the youth? And are they returning to church? Is there a spiritual renaissance happening amongst the youth? That is the question that we are going to attempt to answer and examine the implications, if it is true, of what this means for the country and the people whom are practicing this going forward. Welcome each and every one of you to this new Irrespective live stream. For those of you that might be joining us for the first time, my name is Gio. I usually go live with my co-host and Father Jesus, but not available. He's not available during this edition, but he will return soon enough. For those of you that might be concerned that there might be issues with his health or otherwise, it's fine. Just taking a bit of a break from these, so I'm going solo on this edition. I'd like to play a video for the audience that is from the Timcast. It's from Tim Pool's show. And Libby, whom is one of his co-hosts, asked a Timothy Gordon as to what is fueling a resurgence of attendance to churches, more particularly from the youth. The answer is interesting, and I think it's worth examination as to what the implications are for Christianity in general, what this means with respect to the youth and why they're driving this surge, and what are we to do about this news? What are we to do if this turns out to be the case? Some will say automatically that this is a good thing, that people are finding God, as nebulous as that phrase may be, and that any semblance of a return in the country to Christian religious values is a good thing. Others are saying, well, it depends, especially who they're listening to, what they're returning to. More on that shortly. Before I continue, I'd like to remind the audience to subscribe if you have not done so yet. Whether you're watching this through X, through YouTube, or through Rumble, whatever your preferred outlet is, please subscribe. If you're on Rumble or YouTube specifically, hit the notification bell to be alerted as to when we go live again. And this next advice applies to whether you're watching this on X, YouTube, or Rumble. Click on that thumbs up button, on X more particularly on that heart button. It helps us with the algorithm. If there is organic interest in our content, then you would help us immensely by clicking on that thumbs up button. On X, conversely, on that like button to help advance our content and also share our content. If you're watching this on X, YouTube, or Rumble, please involve yourself. Interact with us by asking your question, placing your comment in the chat. Do not forget to donate. It helps us to continue to publish this content for your edification. There's a QR code in the upper left-hand corner of the screen that you can scan. Conversely, there is a link underneath the video box in the description box beneath that you can tap or click on, depending on what device you're watching this through. And last but not least, do not forget to follow us on the socials, on X at Irrespective77, and on TikTok at The Irrespective. This is the clip that I was referring to, and we will use it to comment on the matter. Let's see.
Why do you think young people are flocking to church? We saw a big increase, 38% over Easter weekend of coming back to church. At my church, there were people who had gone through the whole, when you do the adult confirmation and you can do it, like you could fast track it over Lent. There were people doing that over Lent. There were lots of people getting baptized for the first time, really coming to embrace this faith. Why are people doing that? Why are we seeing that now?
Well, I hate to pick on the boomers again. I actually don't. I love it. But
I think you like picking on the boomers.
Yeah, no, it's the best thing since sliced bread. Other generations seem to be square with what Aristotle called the function argument. The function argument is the best version of a thing is the thing that does its ergon or its job the most fully. So you can use a hammer as a wrench or a wrench as a hammer, but a hammer wants to be a hammer and a wrench wants to be a wrench, and they maximize efficiency when they do what they were created to do. And that's precisely what everyone seems to get, aside from the boomer generation, the baby boomers, and the little generation everyone forgets to shit on enough, which is actually what I call the the boomer babies, the Gen X, thin little generation immediately after them, who basically just followed the boomers in all of their asinine topsy-turvy presuppositions about the world. And everyone else wants the body, blood, soul divinity of Jesus in this 2,000 plus year old patrimony, the church, to look as much and sound and feel as much as it did when it was new. When it, the Last Supper, Holy Thursday, when our Lord broke bread and consummated wine and consecrated the entire meal to all of humanity and posterity as himself, his body, blood, soul, divinity. Everybody else wants to actually recapture that and to go to church, which is go to mass, that is to say, is a bloodless sacrifice every Sunday and every Ember Day and every holy day of obligation in as authentic a way as early Christians did.
A lot to unpack here. Let me begin by saying that I am not going to belittle anyone that is genuinely searching for answers. The only one that can give us those most definitive answers is Christ. I'm a believer, have been for the longest time. I will continue to teach that. However, many people take issues, various issues, that's why I use the plural here, with me, because I have a tendency to, as some have said, be overly cynical about these things, that I can't seem to take good news for what it is. And I have to rain on everybody's parade with these comments. And trust me, far from wanting to blackpill you or wanting to dour the mood, my intention behind these comments is to give you the utmost reality as I am able to see it. And let's face it, being that we are in a fallen world, most of the time what you are going to see is darkness, is sin. Some might say that that outlook is necessarily not a Christian one, but and most people interpret that, my saying that, as being that I am a soulless, joyless individual. Far from it. I actually take a lot of joy in my own life, from my family, from the relationship, my relationship with God. I take utmost joy. But that criticism comes from a place where people prefer their naivetes, if that makes any sense. People prefer whatever pie in the sky view they have about the world. And when someone like myself comes along and says, well, not necessarily, let me go ahead and burst that bubble, then they have a tendency to pour sour milk on the messenger, such as myself. Such will be the same with what I'm about to offer here. Because if you know anything about what I've taught throughout the years, what I've believed throughout the years, the Roman Catholic Church is a heretical institution. Nowhere in the New Testament do you find that anything of what this documentarian by the name of Timothy Gordon, and he is a recalcitrant Catholic, just as you heard, said, nowhere in what you've heard did you hear that people were searching for genuine Christianity. More than anything else, if you heard what you heard, and I heard what I heard, is people are looking for a particular experience. And let me tell you something. If you're looking for an experience, this is much different than wanting to know the truth. I continually revert back to what Jesus says. He says, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Notice that when he says, you shall know, in other words, you come to an understanding of the truth. If you implement that, then you will be free. What most people are looking for today is a sense of euphoria. One of the things that Catholics have been good at, and I use that term good sarcastically, throughout the decades and the centuries, is to provide some sort of experiential portal or intermediary to God. And it aligns very well with what Catholicism has taught for the longest time, that they and their so-called ministers are the intermediaries to Jesus, whom is the intermediary to God. Mind you, that's not what the Bible teaches, but nevertheless, it's been part and parcel of what the Roman Catholic Church has offered for the longest time, whether it's the argument of transubstantiation. If you don't know what that is, it's the Catholic doctrine that when you're taking the bread or the wafer and you're drinking the wine, it literally converts into Jesus' blood and his flesh. So you're committing an act of cannibalism, in a sense, when you're taking communion. Or whether it be that you're taking your first rites, when your parents baptize you as a baby, even though the Bible doesn't speak as baptism done unto infants, but rather adults that have enough agency to engage in the practice of identifying themselves with Christ, having been crucified with Christ, as Paul describes baptism, as the New Testament describes baptism. All in all, and all the other things, whether it be the smoke that is delivered up and down the aisles of the Catholic Mass, or whatever it is that he describes in all of these esoteric terminologies, you'll note that what he is describing here is a desire from the youth to engage in an experientialist activity. And that in all of the things that the Catholic Church offers, that is what satisfies that need. Now, there are those whom would say there is something to what he is saying, because more and more evangelical churches that are offering their own form of experientialist experience, whether it be the concert-like settings, whether it be the gimmickry around Easter Sunday or Super Bowl Sunday, and the way that they decorate the churches and so on and so forth, that there's an abandonment of that in favor of what is known more as traditionalism. Whether it be the women dressing a particular way, the men dressing a particular way, going to the altar so that the priest were to bless you with that. They want, the term here is more ancient, as they say. And then there is a direct correlation in their presentation to what they call genuine faith. But herein lies the problem in all of this. If genuine faith is to be found in human ritualistic behavior, we've got a problem. Because Jesus himself tells the Pharisees that by their traditions they annul the power of the gospel. I'll repeat that again. The principle that Jesus uses to denounce the Pharisees in that their traditions were annulling the power of the gospel is the very same thing that we are seeing when, if it is true what Timothy Gordon is saying in this clip to Libby from Tim Pool's podcast, live streaming, if it is true, then what the youth are looking for is not Christianity per se, not Christianity in and of itself. What they're looking for, what they're trying to find, is an experientialist version of Christianity. And very many organizations and entities will pretend as if that is what they are providing, and that stands as the genuine article, meaning that is genuine Christianity. The thing is that you've got a plethora of Jesus's teachings that contradict this experientialist modularity, as it were, of Christianity. I'll give you an example. Jesus says that where 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, he is there. If you're having a dinner date with your wife and spontaneously you begin to speak about Christian issues relating to family life and what God would have that family do, guess what? Christ is there. If you decide to have conversations with your parents about parenting, about how God would want that family to operate, Jesus is there. Notice the smoke machines are not there. The band is not there. The priest is not there, regaled in his royal robes to offer some sort of pontification and benefaction. None of that is there. You are gathering in his name and you're doing things with the intention of honoring God. Jesus is there. If you want the truly experientialist mode, as it were, of Christianity, you've got exactly, using Jesus's own words, what you need in order to have or to practice, as it were, Christianity proper. But here's the thing. He takes a shot at the baby boomers and he differentiates them from the youth. Of course, being a Catholic, I have to mention this, and I'd be, I think, doing a disservice to the audience if I don't mention what I'm about to mention. Most recalcitrant Catholics do everything that they can to assure that more numbers are being added on to the rolls of Catholicism. It's that way with the Jehovah's Witnesses. It's that way with the Mormons. It's that way with a bunch of other religious sects. At the end of the day, if there's something true to be said about these organizations, and mind you, I get it. I know that there are many whom would call themselves evangelical, that the methodology is to add people for the sake of the organization. I understand that. I'm not disputing that. But it does not discount the fact that you've got people like this and others whom belong to other sects, where the entire project is to continually add people unto the organization, because what receives the ultimate fealty, what receives the ultimate responsibility is not God, it's not Christ. It is the organization that supposedly represents those, represents God, represents Christ, represents, or they claim to represent God, Christ, the gospel, what have you. And therefore, you'll notice that all of these things, they stand as a mediator, they stand as an intermediary between the genuine article. Let me put it to you this way. When he says that the baby boomers, they are very different from the younger generation, I don't see a distinction. Many baby boomers, they will call themselves Catholics because that's what their parents told them that they were, but they're nominal Catholics at best. And by nominal, I mean they don't have any sincere faith. And even then, when we're talking about sincere faith, I think I have to correct myself in that, because when you're talking about faith through the doctrines of Catholicism, we're talking inherently about a heretical entity. It's the same thing with the youth. So the presentation being given here is one that, when you think about it, in reality, there is no difference in the attitudes between the baby boomers, the Gen Xers, and the millennials, that they say, I'm going to go to this institution, I'm going to attend that institution because I want the more sacred experience. I still remember years ago when none other than the so-called Bible answer man, Hank Hanegraaff, announced that he was becoming an Orthodox Christian. And I'm pretty sure you can find that recording on YouTube or elsewhere. And one of the things that he gave as his justification for becoming an Orthodox, if I'm not mistaken, I don't remember if it was Greek Orthodox or Eastern Orthodox. There's some differences there, but nevertheless, he decided to become an Orthodox Christian because he says that the experience, he used that phrase, the experience was much more akin to what he reads in the Bible than anything else. So what we have here are people chasing facades and not the genuine article. And this goes back to something that my dad and I have talked about for years. People need, it's almost as if they can't function without some sort of institutionary power, or just some institution, period, telling them what they should do, how they should do it, et cetera, et cetera. Well, gee, are you against institutions? I would say, well, it depends on the institution, because certain institutions, they might be great, but there's plenty of institutions that are actually more detrimental to us than anything else. I'll give you one example, the federal government. Just to give you one example, just because institutions in a few instances here or there, they might serve for the public benefit, doesn't mean that necessarily the entirety of the methodology of the institution is good, and neither does it mean that every single institution is good. But herein lies the problem. Again, we have this tendency, and by we, I'm just talking about humanity in general. We have to have, seemingly, we have to have this adherence to some institution that tells us this is the way this has to go. This is the instruction, et cetera, et cetera. Well, Gio, but some would ask, didn't Christ leave the church as his representative on earth? Well, when you say the church, what are you pointing at? What are you pointing to? What do you define as the church? Because that needs to be defined before that question can be answered. Yes, we read in the New Testament that Jesus has a bride, the church. But what does that church look like? How does it operate? I can tell you now, what most people have a tendency to think of as the church is not representative of what the New Testament describes as the church. This is something we've talked about. Same thing, according to what this guy mentions in his answer to this co-host of the Timcast. So then, once again, we are left asking the question, because I'm just taking a more of a micro view here, and now we're backing up to, is it good? Is it necessarily a good thing then that more and more younger Americans are so-called returning to church, whereas their ancestors were talking about their parents or their grandparents abandoned the church for secularist tendencies or just secularism in general. But here's the thing. I think we've talked about this before. There was a period there in our most recent history, in the American history, where more and more people were disaffecting themselves of church attendance. And one of the things we've talked about before, we've profiled this before, is that proved in many instances that a lot of people were going to church not because of a sincere faith, not for any other reason except for it was more of a social club. I just go there every Sunday. I listen to the guy who's talking up there for about 45 minutes, give us an exhortational speech. I meet with some people in my community. We might break bread after the fact, and that'll be the end of that. See you guys next week. That's how a lot of people have a tendency to see church. It's more of a social club. It's a social institution. But if you compare that to what I talked about earlier, where you're looking to deploy Christianity sincerely and not just looking at it from an experientialist viewpoint, now we're talking about two items that a wide gulf sits between both. Therefore, to answer the question, is it good that we are seeing young people return to church? I would say it depends. And I know that sounds like I'm copping out from answering the question. And I would qualify that by saying it depends on, for example, what are they looking for? What are they searching for? Are they searching for true Christianity? Is where they're going a place that teaches genuine Christianity? Are they attempting to deploy what Christ commands? Or is it, again, just, I'm here for the fog machine. I'm here for the guys that come down the aisle with the smoke. I'm here because I want to see that priest regaled in that priestly robe, et cetera, et cetera. What are they looking for? That's why I think the proper answer is it depends. The fact of the matter is that I continue to think that exposition is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. I mean, if you think about it, in a sense, I'm kind of doing that right now. Some Christians would say that what I'm doing is sermonizing. I don't see it as a sermon. I just simply see it as giving a viable explanation to answer a question and trying to look at this through the lens, as it were, of how a Christian should view things. But think about it. Even though you're not gathering in a pew, you're watching me say these things, and I hope that I'm conferring upon you, I'm giving you some sort of proper perspective in the matter, so that the proper perspective gives you light, gives you illumination to see things as they need to be seen via the light of Christ's truth. So whether you want to call this church or not, guess what? Christ is here, because we're talking about, and what I'm thinking is the proper perspective on these things. You can call it church, you cannot call it church. It depends on how you view what church is. But in my mind, what I'm doing here, what you're doing here, watching me, I think that we are gathered here in Christ's name, and we're doing something good for both of us. And for those of you that are watching, we're doing something fantastic. We're engaging in examination. Again, it's not the traditional view that some people take. It's not what this guy describes should be the genuine article of Christianity, as I have surveyed it before, but I believe that we're doing something good here. We're doing something in Christ's name. So, like I said at the beginning, some will readily accuse me of pouring cold water. I have this tendency to pour cold water on people, and that I take enjoyment in that. My enjoyment comes from seeing things with clear eyes and according to truth. And for me, I think we ought not view this simply from the vantage point of, I just want to hear good news. I just want to hear good news. If you really want to hear good news, folks, you know what the best news that you can receive is? You yourself go out and minister the gospel to a person who needs it. That will be so much more fulfilling than hearing a Catholic apologist talk to you about how Catholicism is a better experientialist and more accurate representation of Christianity and how the youth are flocking to that. It will be a much, much more fulfilling experience that you do your due diligence. You do what Christ commands you to do, to go out and preach the gospel and minister the gospel to your family, to your friends, to your acquaintances, et cetera, et cetera. That's going to be better for you than simply sitting here and listening to an apologist, a Catholic apologist, say how fantastic it is for the youth to be returning to Catholicism. That's my perspective on the matter, backed, I hope, and I think I've given enough evidence this evening, backed by enough evidence with respect to what we're talking about here. Whenever these things are brought up, these social phenomenons are brought up, they're always portrayed in the most overly simplistic paradigms or representations. It's like you're tuning into a segment of Fox News and they're talking, or CNN, and they're talking about this poll or what we're showing with this focus group and this, that, and the other thing. And it's such a limited view of what's actually happening, and the narrative is crafted as such where you think you're getting the whole story, when in fact, as we've done today during this live stream, when we examine it, we think there's actually a lot left to be talked about here. There are other things at play here. So let me clarify, I'm not against the youth refinding, reconnecting, some will say, with Christianity. It is my hope, sincere hope, and part of the reason that we exist, so that they know what true Christianity is like. That's why we do what we do here. But we need to be careful with these people whom are putting forth these narratives, because under the guise of, look at the good that is happening here, what actually gets disguised, in a sense, is the pitfalls, the traps that they are necessarily leading people into. In addition to the ulterior motives, as I said earlier, this guy is a Catholic apologist, so I don't put it beyond him, as it were, to be a guy whom is an institutionalist, in a sense, above all. And that is saying something as well. As I said before, if I can leave you with this final exhortation, nothing will be more fulfilling for you, more than hearing this sort of news that when one analyzes it, you think, there's more left here than meets the eye, than for you in your immediate orbit to minister the gospel, to live according to it, and that you yourself are living it out, and that those that surround you, you are ministering to them through it. That is the most surest way of entertaining the proper notion that you're actually doing the Christian thing with respect to this aspect. So I hope this gives you the proper perspective on the matter. I'd like to remind the audience that if you have not done so, subscribe. Please, we ask you to subscribe, whether you're watching this on YouTube, on X, or on Rumble. In particular, if you're watching this through YouTube or through Rumble, hit the notification bell to be alerted as to when we go live next, which is consistently Wednesdays, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Sundays at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please smash that like button on YouTube and Rumble if you're watching this through X. Click on that heart button, the like button, and don't forget to share the content with others. Do not forget to donate. It helps us to continue to publish this content for your edification. There's a QR code in the upper left-hand corner of the screen that you can scan. Conversely, there is a link that you can click on beneath the video player in the description box. And last but not least, do not forget to follow us on the socials. TikTok at The Irrespective, and on X at Irrespective77. That's all the time I have left for this edition. I hope that you'll join us for the next live stream of Irrespective. Until then, I bid you adieu and Godspeed.